We're sitting in the mother's room at Skandashram. This is the room where she lived, and this is where she finally passed away in 1922 after being liberated by her son Bhagavan. The mother was an active member of the community here for the first few years. She was cooking the food, looking after the various sadhus who came and went. But for the last 2 years of her life, she was getting increasingly sick. Kunju Swami has reported that she had some strange kind of chronic diarrhea that never went away, and that no treatment was able to arrest her decline. Over time, she became less and less able to look after herself, so Chinnaswami, her son, and Kunju Swami ended up looking after her here and saw her through her final days. On the day that she finally eventually passed away, Bhagavan came and sat with her in this room and spent the whole day with her. Towards the evening, he put his hand on her spiritual heart and said that in her final moments, all of her future lives were revealed to him as a kind of fast-forward film is not quite the right word, but imagine you've got a video on fast-forward. That's how it appeared to him. He said various images came up, and each image was a future life that she would have had to experience had he not put his hand on her heart and removed all the karma, all the vasanas, which would have made those future lives come about. When the final life stopped, the movie reel ended, Bhagavan kept his hands there because he remembered Palaniswami several years before. He had tried to liberate his attendant Palaniswami in Virupaksha cave and had assumed that Palaniswami had somehow realized the self, but at the last minute his jiva reactivated itself and escaped through his eyes. So Bhagavan said, remembering what had happened in Palaniswami's case, I kept my hands there for a much longer time and made sure that my mother was fully liberated. After the liberation had taken place, Bhagavan went out and said, now we can eat. Now this is, in a Hindu cultural context, quite significant. If you've been in contact with a dead body, then the first thing you do is have a ritual bath. You don't eat. By saying now we can eat and going off to join the rest of the devotees, Bhagavan was indirectly announcing that his mother was liberated, that she wasn't in a state of ritual pollution, and that none of the rules that applied to ordinary corpses applied to her because she'd realized the self. Now, people knew that the mother was in a very serious condition. Ganapati Muni was here with a group of his followers, and throughout the day he was doing a Vedic chant with his followers. Another group of people were singing other songs. One man from Punjab, he was busy going Ram, Ram, Ram. So everybody, whatever their tradition, was focusing on a particular spiritual chant which had some significance to them. Once the evening meal was over, arrangements were made for the funeral of the mother the next day. Devotees were sent down to town to get the necessary materials to construct a samadhi at ground level. And then Bhagavan himself announced that they should spend the whole of that night sitting in the mother's presence chanting Tiruvachikam. Tiruvachikam is a 1,000-year-old devotional work composed by Manikavachika. It was one of Bhagavan's favourites. And Kunju Swami has said that they took it in turns to chant the whole work from beginning to end, and that Bhagavan was paying very careful attention to every single line that was chanted, and if anyone made a pronunciation mistake, Bhagavan himself would correct, and then they would carry on. This went on till about 4 o'clock the next morning, by which time some of the materials had been collected for the funeral, and it was decided that her body would be interred at the bottom of the hill on the south side. There is a tradition in Tiruvannamalai that you don't bury a body on the mountain of Arunachala. The mountain is considered to be a lingam, and you don't desecrate a lingam by interring a body on the mountain. So the temple authorities, they came and reminded Bhagavan of this particular rule, and of course he had no intention of desecrating the mountain, even with his own mother's body. So it had been agreed that the body would be taken down the following morning and buried at the foot of the hill in the place where Ramanashram is now located. Kanji Swami narrates that he and Ramaswami Pillai had a few days before gone to the top of the mountain and had found some leftover bamboo poles which someone had cut and failed to collect. So they thought, well, let's take these back to Skandashram, we'll find a use for them. And the first time they were used was making a kind of stretcher palanquin to carry the mother's body very slowly down the hill to the current site of Ramanashram. The party went down the hill and it assembled under the big Bodhi tree, which is still existing on the side of the Pali Tirtham tank, which is nearest the road. A telegram had been sent to Bhagavan's sister and they were waiting for her to arrive. When everybody had assembled, all the devotees came from town, they brought their flowers, they brought their offerings. The body was taken to the site of the mother's temple, where it is now in Ramanashram, and a special samadhi pit was dug there according to the rules of Tirumula. He had a spiritual text which was written about 1,000 years ago, which gives quite detailed instructions on how to bury the body of a saint. Bhagavan had already declared her enlightened, and they were putting on the proper ritual performance for the final interment of the body of a liberated woman. It's an interesting procedure. You make a cubic pit first, you line it with stones, then inside that cubic pit you make a triangular wall out of bricks. You put the body inside in full lotus, you drape it in a special cloth, and then you fill in all the space inside that triangular brick structure with camphor vibhuti. You put a stone slab on top, then you fill in the whole grave and put a sealed stone on top. I talked to Kanji Swami about this, and he remembers helping with this, and he said he didn't really know about the official rules, but he said he was told that when you bury a jnani, the body shouldn't come in contact with earth, it should only be in contact with stone, and he was told this as he was digging the funeral pit. Now, after the conclusion of all the ritual ceremonies, there was a big feast in Palakottu. A temple clarinet, Nadaswaram player, had been hired, and he walked very, very slowly to Palakottu at the head of the procession. He faced all the other people who were walking behind him. Instead of walking forwards, he walked backwards. Bhagavan was the next person, and Kanji Swami has reported that it took almost an hour to walk what's probably about 200 yards from the mother's samadhi to the place in Palakottu where they had their meal. And Kanji Swami said it was a glorious sight. The Nadaswaram player was playing, he was swaying backwards and forwards, and Bhagavan, with his eyes closed a lot of the time, was swaying backwards and forwards to the rhythm of the music. And very, very slowly this funeral party made its way to Palakottu, where they had a big post-funeral feast, and then everyone dispersed and went back to their homes. Bhagavan went back up to Skandashram and continued to come down to the foot of the hill for about 6 months, and then one day he came down and never went back up again. Now there are several theories as to why Bhagavan abandoned Skandashram and went to live at Ramanashram. Kanji Swami, for example, said he did it for the benefit of the elderly devotees who couldn't regularly come to Skandashram to see him. But Bhagavan himself never gave a reason. All that Bhagavan said was that I came down the hill one day and there was no command inside me to go back up the hill to Skandashram. So it wasn't a positive decision, I will go down the hill, I will stay there. He said simply the self never issued the command inside himself to walk back up the hill to Skandashram and carry on living there. So when Bhagavan, in the absence of this go back up the hill command, stayed down at Ramanashram, a small community started to grow there. A coconut leaf hut had been built over the mother's samadhi, and that became the basis of the new Ramanashram. For several years Bhagavan lived in a coconut leaf structure which had been constructed over the mother's samadhi, and I think for at least 2 or 3 years it was just 2 little small thatched rooms over the mother's samadhi, and then in the later 1920s slowly the ashram started to develop. But initially all of Ramanashram consisted of one thatched hut over the remains of Bhagavan's mother, whom Bhagavan had declared enlightened, who he had taken down the hill, buried her at the current site of Ramanashram, and her body became the nucleus for the growth of the Ramanashram we see today.
Vande Sri Ramana Maharshi Padabjam Yo me darshedisham bhandam dvandamaditya Yastano Darunajalasya Padayo Smritva Jani Prapyede Divyanugraha Suprava